This is Campus Currency, and we are finishing up part 4 of our series on FAFSA dependency questions. In this video, we're going to talk about what a dependency override is, who qualifies for this override, and what documentation would need to be submitted to the college. So we went through these 13 questions over the past 3 videos that talk about dependency status, and if you answered no to every single one of them, then you would have reached this screen here, which basically says, based on those answers to those questions, you're considered a dependent student, which means you must provide parental information on the FAFSA. However, you may have had a circumstance which wasn't addressed in those 13 questions, and so you can check the circle here for being unable to provide parental information, and then you'll be able to submit documentation to the college pertaining to a dependency override to make yourself an independent student. Now, in order to do that, there has to be special circumstances that weren't listed. So occasionally that happens where a student answered no to all those 13 questions, but still can't provide parental information for a variety of reasons. And this could include neglect or abuse by the parents, in which student contact with the parents could be detrimental to the student's physical or emotional well-being. Situations where you're unable to locate your parents, so the student doesn't know where the parents are and have no contact whatsoever. This could be situations where maybe the parents live in a foreign country and maybe the student grew up and was living with a relative or grandparent in the United States and doesn't even have contact with their parents. It could also be a situation where both parents are incarcerated, or maybe there's the household is the parents are involved in heavy alcohol or drug use, where once again the contact with the parents would be unhealthy for the student. But this does not limit these aren't just the only conditions that apply. If you have any condition that you think applies, you should contact your financial aid office and ask them, and they will be able to guide you and let you know what the situation would be like and what you need to submit. So obviously you're going to have to submit documentation in order to support your claim if any of these things exist. So some of the things that will be required of you that's usually asked by colleges is a letter from a third-party non-family member. This could be someone such as a lawyer or a clergy person from a church, a synagogue, temple, or mosque. It could be a letter from a social worker or a therapist. Anybody that can attest to and verify the circumstances that you're outlining in the personal letter that you're going to write to the college, explaining why you cannot provide your parents' information. So typically these letters have to be written on letterhead from either the business or the agency, or if it's a therapist, from their own letterhead. And it's also got to be signed by that third-party member and provided with contact information so the school may follow up if they need to. You can also get documentation from a court system or a parole or probation officer or a high school counselor. So in situations where maybe there was domestic violence or abuse going on in the household, if law enforcement was involved, if you have documentation of that proves that you shouldn't be around your parents for any reason, you can submit that documentation as well. Once again, the burden of proof falls on the student. So each college sets their own standards as to what they consider acceptable documentation. Documentation that's accepted by one college does not have to be accepted by another college. So you will need to follow up with each individual college that you're applying to, let them know of your circumstances, and let them guide you in determining what paperwork and documentation you need to submit. So if your dependency override is approved, then you will not need to provide your parents' information on the FAFSA application, and that override should be in effect for the entire time that you're attending college until you can answer yes to one of the dependency questions, which would make you independent automatically. So there are instances that students come to the financial aid office with that are not considered special circumstances, even though the student feels that they have a right to be considered independent. And a couple of these instances are if a student answered no to all the dependency questions and they're living on their own independently, paying their own rent, filing their own taxes, and providing for 100% of their own care. So you get situations where a student may be 22 or 23 years old. Because they're under that 24-year-old threshold on the dependency status questions, they are still considered dependent in most circumstances unless they were able to answer yes to one of the other questions. Situations where a student's not in contact with their parents due to a family argument or a disruption in the family due to a difference in either the student or the parent's beliefs or morals or values or life choices, regardless of the length of time between the last contact. Now, we're not talking about situations of abuse or neglect. We're just talking about your basic arguments within the family where there are differences and maybe some very strongly held opinions where the parent and the student do not disagree. Does not qualify as a special circumstance to override dependency. And also the final one is a parent's refusal to provide their income and asset information on the FAFSA. There are times where, because the student may be independent and living on their own, where the parent feels like they don't need to provide their information and they refuse to. They don't want to have the school having that information. Unfortunately, the U.S. Department of Education sets the standard as to who's considered a dependent student or an independent student, and if that student has answered no to those 13 questions, the parent must provide that information. Otherwise, the student will only qualify for a direct, unsubsidized loan each year, and that is the only financial aid they will qualify for. I hope you found this information helpful. In our next video, we're going to be getting into the actual FAFSA application step by step. So if you found this information helpful, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.